Good morning. Welcome to a new week, Monday morning on Rochester Today. I'm Andy Brownell at News Talk 1340, KROC AM at 96.9 FM. My pleasure to welcome back to the microphones for another visit. Tim
Always
Penny.
Good. Yeah. Always good to be with you.
Executive Director, CEO of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation and former Congressman. We'll mention that as well. And, I guess the main impetus for us getting together this morning is to talk about a big event coming up at Mayo Civic Center in Rochester, an annual event that gets bigger and bigger every year, and it's Feast.
Yep.
Food festival.
I refer to it as the Feast Festival, and I always describe it as a farmer's market on steroids. We have sponsored this event along with Renewing the Countryside, Compeer Financial, and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture for this is our 11th year. It's always at the Mayo Civic Center, and this year it's going to be Saturday, November 2nd from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We have already nearly 90 exhibitors signed up for this event, so I'm sure we'll have beyond 90 by the time we get to November 2nd. It's a variety of foods: cheeses, meats, sauces, syrups, cookies, crackers, chips, you name it. It runs the gamut. And a lot of ethnic foods as well. And I think so far 15 beverage companies have signed up. So that's beer and wine and distilled spirits. But it's also a family affair. There are games for the kids. There's entertainment in the corner of the auditorium. And there are cooking demonstrations. So there's fun for all ages. And again, we get like 1,300 people to come each year. I really am confident this year is going to blow through those numbers because every year people come because they've been there before, and this is now a part of their pre-holiday experience. It's kind of getting ready for Thanksgiving and Christmas. You can come and buy food for the family or gifts for friends. And again, it's a family affair, and we're excited to bring this to the region for the 11th year in a row.
Is it right to say that a lot of your exhibitors are smaller producers in this region who are getting their products into the local retailers?
Yep, I would say universally true, that these are smaller scale businesses, many of whom grow their own stuff and then turn it into some kind of a product, and others who source locally. They buy from local food producers in the area in order to make their syrups and sauces and whatever they might make. So you'll learn about all of them at the booths. You can sample their stuff at each of the booths, and then most of them will have retail sales going on that day.
I was perusing your website last night, and I saw that you give it an award every year.
Yeah, this will be the People's Choice Award.
And last year's was elderberry syrup.
Yeah.
I'll admit, I've never heard of it.
That's why you come to this event, because you don't know what you're going to discover. But you'll find a lot of interesting foods on display, and you'll get to meet the producers, processors of these products, and get to learn their story. Again, it's become quite a festive event, and that's why I always refer to it as the Feast Festival.
Feast Festival, Mayo Civic Center on November 2nd. I know the whole foodie thing and the craft beers and even the local distilleries. Over the last decade, it's become such a huge thing. I know people that's what they do on their weekends now. They get in their cars and they'll take a vehicle full of people and they'll just do tours of these smaller communities and check out, the local goods.
Yep. It's becoming a part of the tourist attraction of our region. It starts with the wineries and the breweries. We're seeing more of those crop up here in our part of the state. But you do have a lot of local food venues, and and farms that'll put a sign at the end of the driveway saying, the eggs for sale or, honey for sale or whatever it might be. So it's really becoming a part of the tourist attraction in our corner of the state. But we're so excited about this because, as I phrase it, by supporting local foods, you're supporting small business, you're supporting rural farms, you're supporting our rural communities. So it's why 12 years ago, actually, we began working with Renewing the Countryside, Compeer Financial, the Department of Agriculture, the Grape Growers Association, the Farmers Market Association, and others to figure out what can we do to elevate the awareness of local foods in our region and support those local food producers and processors. And this event is one of the outcomes of that collaboration.
What I love about this whole happening with local foods is instead of taking all these ingredients that are grown in our fields and shipping them by train to some big giant conglomerate that's going to put together, cereals or whatever it may be, that value is added locally and the money stays local, right? The real outcome of the work of the local growers, they benefit more when it's done this way than it is the other direction.
Yeah, and there's a statistic that says that every dollar spent locally churns in the economy 7 times. So this really pays a huge dividend for our local economy when you support local businesses and, in this case, local foods.
And one other thing before we move on to other topics about the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, on your website, I discovered something I had no knowledge of before, but there's an actual online publication you have a link to that's all about these local entrepreneurs throughout Minnesota, Iowa, even northern Illinois and western Wisconsin that are participating in this economic, upswing locally, dealing with locally produced food and other products. And it was a really interesting read. And you can, I off the top of my head, I think it does use feast in the title of the publication as well.
Yeah. And it's part of the, it's part of the collaboration that I described earlier with all these various organizations. The Feast Festival is one event. That magazine is another outgrowth of this collaboration, again, to promote the local food sector. And it's the Feast magazine. And every year, about a month ahead of the Feast event, the November 2nd event this year, we distribute this magazine to coffee shops and bakeries and other gathering places, breweries, wineries all across southern Minnesota, partly to promote the event, but also just to promote local foods generally, because there are a variety of stories of local food producers and processors that we highlight in this magazine every year.
Neat stuff. If I want to go to the event at the Mayo Civic Center November 2nd, how do I get tickets? What do I need to know?
If you want to save a couple bucks, you can go online and order tickets now. And to do that, you just type in local-feast.org, and it'll take you to a site where you can order tickets ahead of time. And ticket sales ahead of time are well ahead of pace this year. So getting to your point earlier, Andy, about people really looking forward to this event every year, a lot of those people are now registering early and saving themselves a couple bucks. If you, however, do want to sample some of the distilled spirits, the wine, the beer, then it's $25 ahead of time. At the door, on Saturday, November 2nd, you'll pay $10 per person. And then if you want to sample the alcoholic beverages, it's $30 per person. So still at $10 a person, it's a pretty low cost event. And I believe children under 12 years old are free because this is very much a family event.
And these sort of events, it's amazing to me, how family friendly they are, and it's a different type of atmosphere when you go there if you haven't experienced it before.
Yeah.
This summer I went to a arts festival up in Duluth where my daughter lives because her in-laws are part of this community now. And it was a blast. I had a great time. We were there for hours and hours. You might see my face at your feast this year, Tim.
I sure hope so. I'll be there most of the day. And my wife comes and never leaves without 2 full bags of food and other items that we then take home and use during the holiday season.
So what are the hours again?
Again, Saturday, November 2nd, Mayo Civic Center from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m.
Okay. Look forward to it. The Feast Festival coming up in the first Saturday in November. Be sure to check it out. And, of course, if you didn't get that link, it's easy to find if you go to the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation website and look at their calendar of events. It's right there. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more with Tim Penny on Rochester Today on News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9. We're back with more Rochester Today with Tim Penny. I'm Andy Brownell, and this is News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. And before we began the show on air, Tim, you mentioned that there's a lot going on with the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation.
Oh, tons of stuff. Can I start with early childhood? Because I've been on your show, every other month for years, and I always appreciate the opportunity to give an update on what's going on here at the Southern Minnesota Foundation. Again, just to remind folks, we are a regional economic and community development foundation. We've been around for almost 40 years now, and we have it varies from year to year, but about $6 million a year that we can expend to invest in activities in our region that we think will help enhance the vitality of Southern Minnesota. We do 3 things: early childhood, entrepreneurship, and small towns. Those are our 3 program areas, and roughly a couple $1 million each year expended in each area. In early childhood, the most recent stuff to announce is that we're doing early childhood provider trainings. So if you're an in-home or a center-based child care provider, this is an opportunity to attend trainings in the evening at no cost. We even feed you a meal to make it easy for folks that are working all day long caring for these preschool-age kids to come and get the training they need, the continuing education credits they need to stay in business and be the best they can be. And so we do trainings this spring, summer, fall, and winter, all throughout the year. And our fall trainings that are still coming up are a training on creating wonderland in your child care. This one will be in New Prague on October 22nd. We have another training called Encouraging Curiosity in Young Children. That'll be November 7th in Lake Crystal. And a third training in Faribault about promoting self-control. And that'll be on November 12th. So you can go to Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, Google it. We should be the first thing that comes up on your Google search. And you can register online for these upcoming trainings. And then we will soon announce our training series for the winter time frame. And again, most of these are in the evening, so it's convenient for the providers to come to these trainings. Sometimes they're on the weekend. We offer them throughout the year, and it's a benefit to our early childhood providers to be able to get the trainings they need, to get the continuing ed credits they need, and to stay in business and do the best they can with these young kids in their care.
Yeah, my sister has been in that business for 30 plus years. And it is difficult to find the time to get to those type of training events. To do them the way that you're doing them is, I'm sure, greatly appreciated.
Yep. And we get good registration at each of our events. And I think last year there were like 740 early childhood providers in our region that took advantage of our free trainings. One other thing is that right now we are taking applications for our annual early childhood grant program. And this is available to groups and organizations that are trying to improve, enhance, expand their early childhood programming or the quality of their programming in their respective towns. And we give away quite a few of these grants every year, a couple of 100,000. I think we capped the amount around 20,000 as a maximum grant. But, your early childhood family education program at a school district, for example, will be the kind of organization that will typically apply for these grants to, again, enhance and improve the early childhood programming that they offer in their community.
The deadline,
and I think
for that
the deadline for this, pardon me, Andy, for stumbling over you, but the deadline for applying for this annual early childhood grant program is, I believe, October 24th. So there's still a week or more to get your application in.
Time is flying by quickly.
So other than that, our economic development work or our entrepreneur work is another of the buckets that we invest in. And among the activities there, one is that we work with a group called Red Wing Ignite, and actually I'm heading there later today because I think they're rebranding their organization, and there's an event late this afternoon for that purpose. But we partner with them to offer an entrepreneur competition every year. We used to do one on our own years ago that was only focused on college students that were trying to create a business. So campuses often have an entrepreneur competition on campus, and then we would invite each of these campuses, Winona, St. Olaf, Mankato State, Gustavus Adolphus, to send their competitors to a region-wide competition. Well, we then expanded that to be any young person. And then because Red Wing Ignite was doing another entrepreneur competition, we just merged the two a few years ago. And it was a smart thing to do because now we have such exciting competitors in this program each year. And the winner of our regional entrepreneur competition then automatically gets enrolled in something the University of Minnesota sponsors called MinCup.
Sure.
And it's a statewide competition for emerging entrepreneurs. And they have different categories: a women's category, a youth category, a food and beverage category, a medical technology category. But you get the benefit of competing with others. You get coaches that kind of help you with your business plan and help you get ready to make your pitch. So even if you don't win this competition and hundreds of people compete every year, you get a lot of benefit out of participating. But we also offer that not only does the winner from our regional competition get to compete in the state competition, if there's any business from our 20-county region here in southern Minnesota that wins in one of these divisions, then our foundation, the Southern Minnesota Foundation, will make an investment in that business, a grant to that business. So last year it was a young lady, I believe from Mayo High School, that won this competition.
I remember this.
And this year, it was Loon Liquors, the distillery from Northfield, that won the competition in the food and beverage division. So I was there to give them a small check to invest in the growth of their business. So it's just kind of a fun event, and it really does help to encourage entrepreneurship. And the business startups are where we're growing the new jobs, and small businesses are the ones creating most of our new jobs. So it's just a small way that our foundation is trying to partner up and invest in new business growth here in our region.
And once again, it keeps the economic engine churning in this region. Keeps the money here.
Yep, that's right. It sure does. One other thing that we just did a month ago, less than a month ago, is our annual Entrepreneur Bridge event. And this was our 10th annual Entrepreneur Bridge event. It's basically a day-long seminar with guest speakers and panelists, and it's designed for small business owners, a lot of them loan clients of our foundation, to come for a day where they can kind of learn from other people's experience, and then take away from that some learnings they can take back to their own business, but also a good day of networking with other emerging entrepreneurs, other small business people, and also some service providers like the SBDC, the SBA, our technical colleges, and CEDA, the Community Economic Development Associates, which provide economic development assistance to small towns. So it's a good way to connect up with resource people as well. And that event was the biggest ever. We had well over 150 people at the event, the vast majority of them small business people. And that was held at Wedgwood Cove in Elbert Lee, and we've been in Elbert Lee with this event now the last 3-4 years, and so we're already setting the date for next September to bring folks the 11th annual Entrepreneur Bridge event.
So entrepreneurs, put that on your calendar.
Yep. And a couple of other things in our entrepreneur space. We are taking applicants now for our Prosperity Initiative. This is a business mentoring coaching program for primarily new immigrant and minority entrepreneurs here in our area. So we're trying to get the word out. And so thank you for helping me do that. And I think for the next number of weeks, we're still going to take applicants for our program. And we enroll people into this program, and then we link them up with a mentor or a coach that can help them with their business idea and take it to scale. But we also create kind of a peer group where these folks get together and learn from one another, and we bring in expert speakers, things like that. So that's another activity that we're very proud of here. And so I like wanted to make sure to mention that today.
If somebody, comes here and they're completely unfamiliar with the permitting processes and how to, deal with, if it's a food type business, you've got to get those health department permits and all of that sort of situations.
Yep.
Have somebody hold your hand while you go through that. It would be a big deal.
So that's the whole purpose here. And we've had good success with this program over the last several years, and we're now taking applicants for another cohort. And then right now we are working with the Rochester Area Foundation on something called Circle for Good. And it's a peer learning and networking opportunity for leaders in the nonprofit area. So if there's an organization that's working with new immigrant or minority groups in communities in our immediate region, we are working hand in glove with Rochester Area Foundation to offer this Circle for Good program, which again will bring these leaders of these nonprofits together to help them be better at what they do. Sure. And to learn from one another. So this is available for nonprofit leaders to focus on their organization's business and how to enhance and improve their programmatic activity, largely serving the new immigrant and minority populations in our area.
You were not kidding when you said a lot is going on with the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation.
And that doesn't even count our Inclusive and Equitable Community Grant Program or our Rural Entrepreneur Venture Grant Program, both of which we just concluded within the last several weeks.
Wow. I'll tell you what, Tim, we need to take another break, get to the news at the bottom of the hour here. We'll return with more with Tim Penny on Rochester Today, Monday morning, News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
The News App.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Rochester Today. I'm Andy Brownell. It's News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. Happy to have with me today former Congressman Tim Penny, Executive Director, CEO of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. And if you were listening before the break, you can relate to the many, many activities going on, with the highlight being the Feast Festival coming up November 2nd at Mayo Civic Center. But Tim, we haven't covered everything that's going on with the foundation, correct?
No, the third bucket is small towns. So we've talked about our early childhood work, our recent early childhood work, and our more recent entrepreneur work. But this time of year is also the time of year that we offer small town grants. And we can do twice as many grants now because the Paul Johnson family a few years ago reached out to us to offer to support our small town work. And so they are matching dollar for dollar the amount that we would normally issue in small town grants each year. And we can give up to $10,000 per community. I think we did 24 grants this year with the dollars that we had available. And some examples of the grants that we issued and are just announcing now are Dundas for cycling opportunities for adults with disabilities, to Cannon Falls for a visual storytelling project, for Adams and Teope for some Christmas in the city kind of activities, to the city of Iota for some welcoming events that they want to offer, to Mantorville for Main Street beautification, to Orinoco for a community branding project, for St. Charles for a comprehensive plan that they want to undertake to kind of scope out some visions for the future in St. Charles. So those are just some examples of the grants that we make available through our annual small town grant program.
Nice. Quite a few local to Rochester communities benefiting.
You bet. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the newly created Taylor Family Farm Foundation. Glenn Taylor, who owns the Timberwolves and the Lynx and now the Minnesota Star Tribune, but also Taylor Corporation. He's a southern Minnesota guy, grew up on a farm over in Brown County. He's been very generous with donations to Minnesota State University Mankato and other organizations. But he decided a year ago that he wanted to take some of the farmland that he owns and then rents to farm families and donate that farmland to this newly created foundation. Those families will still rent the land, but after taxes and expenses, the rental income can go toward annual grant making. So that's the whole purpose of it. And I'll take some credit because we have this Acres for Good program, right, where we're urging people to consider us or one of our 32 small town community funds that we help to support and donate, land to create a flow of revenue for either our work or the work going on in these 32 small town communities, or to create a family foundation. Nonetheless, Mr. Taylor created this family farm foundation with the donation of thousands of acres of his own land. And we just had a meeting on Monday with the foundation board, which Mr. Taylor asked me to be a member of. And I think we issued somewhere in the neighborhood, we agreed to somewhere in the neighborhood of 64 grants focused on emergency services needs in smaller towns. And so it just fire equipment, rescue equipment, fire vehicles, ambulance type vehicles. Yep. So I'm not at liberty to share which towns got this money, but just know that an announcement will be coming forward shortly about the grants that will be issued for emergency services needs in small towns all across southern Minnesota through this newly created Taylor Family Farm Foundation.
Wow. And those smaller town emergency services have been under a great deal of strain.
Yep.
Over the past few years, especially the ambulance paramedic services.
Yep. For sure. And so we view this new foundation as a great partner in supporting small towns here in rural Minnesota, and glad to have them in the mix, and delighted that their first grant round focused on emergency services needs, which, as you just said, are so critically important.
All right. We're going to take a break. Tim Penny's with us this morning. Back in just a moment on Rochester Today at Newstalk 1340, KROC AM and 96 Tablet. It's Rochester Today, Monday morning. I'm Andy Brownell with Tim Penny, former congressman, and as well as Executive Director, CEO of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. And we've been chatting about the foundation quite a bit, but I always enjoy tapping your brain, Tim, to talk about current events. And, of course, the current event is the upcoming election in just a few weeks. And with early voting underway in Minnesota now for a couple of weeks, the election, I guess you could argue, is already taking place. I don't remember in my lifetime experiencing an election cycle quite like this one. Do you share that opinion? Is this not only the closeness of the race, but all of the occurrences that have happened leading up to the election?
Yes, yes. I'm on the same page as you are that, a lot, well, I'm older than you, so
Yep.
maybe I do have some recollections of election years that were, equally, I don't know, unexpected. In 1968, of course, Lyndon Johnson pulled out in March of that year.
I
In
was a
large
little
part
kid at
because
that point.
a Minnesota Senator, Eugene McCarthy, had an unexpectedly strong showing in the primary in New Hampshire. And so he pulled out. And then his vice president, our state's Hubert Humphrey,
Right.
jumped in. And Robert Kennedy then jumped in. And then, of course, sadly, Kennedy was assassinated a couple months later. And then we went on to a very, very close election in November between Humphrey and Nixon. So there are parallels.
Yes, it's funny you brought that up because
nothing in the recent past quite
mentioned
compares
that
with
as
what
well.
we've seen this year.
The parallels with '68, and even the Democratic convention being held in Chicago and the protests that were taking place. Obviously, not at the scale that they were in 1968, but still in a different type of protest as well, although it also dealt with a war.
Yeah, a different type of war. That time, a war that we were directly engaged in and administering. It was very the front end of the anti-war movement, which then carried forward all during the Nixon years until we finally left Vietnam. But this time, just protesters in opposition to a war in which we aren't directly engaged, but we do have a major ally in Israel that was attacked, and we provided both diplomatic support and military support to them as they responded to that attack.
Yeah. But moving forward to what's happening now, 2024, and this campaign season, I guess I'll share with you my greatest disappointment about what is happening now is that neither party, neither candidate, I can't think of a single candidate, even a third-party candidate, discussing what I consider probably one of the more pressing issues, and I know you might share this opinion, our national debt and deficit. And it seems to me that both candidates, Trump and Harris, have spent the past couple of months touting additional spending without any real answer as to how to pay for it.
Yeah, additional spending or additional tax cuts of some sort without offsets. And so all of it then adds to our deficits and our debt. As you know, because I think we talk about this every time I'm on your show, I have the privilege and the honor of being a co-chair along with Leon Panetta and Mitch Daniels of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And we, as a committee, we've got like 30 people on our board of directors, people that used to run the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Budget Office, the Office of Management and Budget at the White House. So a lot of budget experts on our board. And we issued a letter to both campaigns saying, please start talking honestly about the deficit and quit making all of these deficit increasing promises. And that letter just went out last week. And then we did an analysis of the economic plans, the tax and spending plans of both Trump and Harris, and issued that report a couple weeks ago. Trump's plan, because he wants to extend all of the tax cuts that he and the Congress enacted in 2017, would add roughly $7 trillion to the debt over the next decade. We estimate that in Harris's case, because she will not extend the tax cuts for the wealthiest or the tax cuts for corporations, that she will still add, because of all the other tax cuts that she has embraced, still add 3.5 or 4 trillion to the debt over the next decade. But she also raises taxes in order to create new spending programs. So on the one hand, she maybe, because she doesn't cut taxes as much as Trump would cut taxes, she promises new spending, which then obligates us to long-term spending. And so if you're going to raise taxes and just spend the money, you're not making any progress on the deficit. So there's not much to get excited about with either candidate at the moment from my fiscal or budgetary perspective.
It seems to be almost right now, as we're running up to the actual vote, both campaigns seem to just to be tossing stuff out there that probably really don't have a chance of being enacted either.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. Whoever wins the House, Democrats or Republicans, it's going to be by a very, very narrow margin, just a few seats either way. The same is true in the Senate. If the Democrats retain control, it'll be a one vote margin at best. If the Republicans gain control, it'll be a 2 or 3 vote margin, most likely. So there's not a supermajority in either chamber to get things done. And it's possible that you'll have a Democratic House and a Republican Senate, which then means whoever's the president, right, they've got a divided Capitol Hill. But maybe, this is an odd observation, but maybe the gridlock that might create is better than the agenda that they might enact if one side got their way.
Another 4 years of, But I guess the issue of the deficit and the debt, I'm still amazed that it doesn't seem to have traction. It doesn't seem to resonate either with the media or with the electorate. The numbers are, frightening at this point. I think, aren't we? I mean, you probably know these numbers better than I do. Either we're close to or we're already at the level where the interest payments on the debt are equal to what we're spending on national defense.
Yeah. We spent in fiscal year 2024, which just ended September 30th, $900 billion on interest payments alone. And that is more than we spent on all defense matters. It's more than we spent on the Medicare program. So it is now, I think the second largest item in our budget is interest on the national debt, second only to the Social Security program.
Wow. And both of those figures will rise. Yeah. Social Security for demographic reasons and the interest because we can't seem to stop spending. Yeah.
And so I always say these interest payments aren't buying us anything new. And so we're pushing all that money out the door just to pay for programs of the past. It is not buying us any new activity or new programs. It's just paying for our excesses over the past number of years.
And once again, I guess I'm going to express an opinion. If I was a younger person right now, which I am not, I think I'd be screaming bloody murder about this.
Well, because these interest payments don't go away.
No.
And as we continue to add to the debt, interest payments over time only go higher. And it means that the next generation is going to pay for the benefits that we receive in our generation.
And that's a transfer of wealth that they come out on the short end, very much so. And I guess as a person who's getting longer in the years, I'm looking at my hopeful, I haven't had any yet, but grandchildren. And that we're saddling them with this more so than even my own children.
Yeah. I haven't looked at this number recently, but I think the debt burden, if you assign that to every living American, man, woman, and child, is like over $50,000 per person is the debt that we owe, or the share that we owe of the national debt right now. It's probably higher than that.
And this Social Security, Medicare insolvency deadline is approaching so rapidly. It's a decade out.
And the only reason that we're not
years out.
Yeah, the only reason we're not already in crisis with Social Security and Medicare is because we have the so-called trust funds, which is money paid through payroll taxes that wasn't needed at the time, and so we set it aside, but we didn't invest it. We basically used that money to offset the deficit in the rest of the budget. But now we're repaying the trust fund because we owe it back to the Social Security and Medicare programs. But within the next decade, the trust funds will be exhausted. And at that point, the only money we will have for those programs is money paid by current workers through their payroll tax. And in the case of Social Security, by the year 2031, 2032, we will only collect annually enough payroll taxes to finance about 78% of the benefits we've promised. So we're headed toward a crisis. And I can't believe that we have two presidential candidates that have gone out of their way to promise that they won't do anything to touch Social Security or Medicare when both programs are headed toward a fiscal cliff.
Yeah, and the message needs to be hammered home, in my view, that will be a reduction in benefits. It won't be 100% reduction in benefits, but you're going to see not quite a 25% reduction in benefits under the most rosy scenario that we're looking at today.
Yep. Or there is another alternative, and I fear this alternative is maybe even worse. And that's that when we get to that point, if we have done nothing to fix the problem, when we get to that point, we'll simply borrow money to cover the shortfall.
Which exacerbates the other problem.
That spirals out of control.
And this is me talking to my children to try to get them to understand the issue, because they think in terms of, oh no, that will mean our taxes will go through the roof because this will have to be covered as a bill. No, it means your standard of living will be reduced substantially because the value of the U.S. dollar will be impacted. Every aspect of your life will be impacted by this financial crisis.
Yeah, for sure. But we're still several years out. We don't have political leaders that are helping us understand the challenge we face, and yet with each passing year, what we have to do to avert the crisis becomes more and more difficult. We should have dealt with both of these programs 10, 20 years ago. And I was actually on the President's Social Security Commission 20 years ago when we recommended a way to return Social Security to a long-term solvency. And all of that got shot down because nobody on Capitol Hill wanted to deal with it. But if we had done it then, the changes we would have had to make were far less draconian than the changes that we will have to make now that we're this close to the crisis.
In my own industry, my disappointment is that in all of these media interviews with these candidates that are offered, I don't hear representatives of the media asking the candidates about this issue.
Yeah,
and why the inaction is allowed or accepted.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of that on 60 Minutes, CBS 60 Minutes with Vice President Harris a week or so ago. And I will give our Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget some credit because we have seen in the last month a lot of news organizations using our data and our comparison of the Trump and Harris tax and spending plans as a way to create questions, but the answers are an artful dodge. There may be increasing evidence that reporters are beginning to ask these questions, but we're not getting honest answers.
And there we go. I imagine the next time we'll talk, we'll bring this up again. But Tim, I always appreciate you coming and spending time with us and informing our listeners about what's happening with the foundation and all the activities. And maybe right before we go, one last chance to put a plug in for the Feast Festival.
Yep, the Local Foods Feast Festival coming up on Saturday, November 2nd from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the afternoon at the Rochester Mayo Civic Center.
Awesome. Go to the website if you want to buy tickets early. I'm sure we can find a link for you. And that's the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. Tim, thanks again.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. Tim Penny, I'm Andy Brownell. This is Rochester Today. News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.